Yes, I am.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
I am very happy with my place in the world. I don't know where else I would be, so I guess I am happy with where I'm at right now. Well, I don't know where else where I should be.
Yes.
Yeah, I am happy. So I still work on this day today.
I'm happy with my place in the world, but I'm not content, I would say.
I don't think I would change much.
Well, the first thing that pops in my head is location.
Oh, well, I've lived here all my life, almost 90 years. So I love Nashville.
Of course, I'd like to have no student loan debt, right? But in terms of relationships and job and all that kind of stuff, things are really good.
I would be the president right now because I think I know what's best for this country.
Certain people that I live with in the world.
I would say I feel like I could be in better places, I always want to strive to be better than what I am now. So it's always better to strive to be more, because you never can just sit in one spot because then you're not at your greatest. You never know until you reach the top.
This is Everyday Grace TV, where there is story, there is grace. I'm Mary Ann Drilley, and we are happy to have you with us.
And I'm Jay Locklear, and on this episode of Everyday Grace TV, we're going to be exploring the idea of our place in the world and all that that means. Thank you so much for watching and for being with us.
As you saw in our opening video, we've taken our cameras out into different areas of North Carolina to explore two questions. Are you happy with your place in the world? And if you could change your place, what would you change? So Jay, let me ask you, are you happy with your place in the world?
Generally speaking, I am. I'm in a place right now where I get to do things like this, be on Everyday Grace TV and play music. But I'm also in a place where I'm asking questions and trying to figure things out, but it feels like those answers come a little bit easier. Maybe it's because I'm a little bit older or have a little bit more life experience, but right now it feels good. My place in the world feels good. How about you? How do you feel about your place in the world?
I'm really happy with my place in the world, and at the same time, I feel because I was born in the United States, my first language is English, I'm white, that I speak from a very privileged place, which is much different than many other women in the world.
It is a privileged place for us to be in, to be born in a country like the United States, English as our first language. We have a lot to explore when we're talking about this idea. So we're going to do some of that today, but not just by ourselves. We're also going to do that with the help of some of our guests. So today we have with us on the show Laura Thrower, who is a rickshaw driver and a teacher in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Britton Shackelford, who is a fisherman from Wanchese, North Carolina.
We're also delighted to have Belton Joyner again, our resident biblical storyteller. If you would like to be a part of these Everyday Grace TV conversations, please follow us on Twitter. That's #EDGTV. And visit our website, everydaygrace.tv. Next up, stories about place with fisherman Britton Shackelford. I'm so glad you and Audra could join us today on Everyday Grace TV.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So I would like to start out asking you the same question that we've been asking folks in different parts of North Carolina, and that is, are you happy with your place in the world?
I am happy with my place in the world. I'm a fisherman, and I feel like I'm right where God wants me to be.
That's wonderful. And how long have you been a fisherman?
I've been a fisherman all my life. I come from a long line of fishermen. My family has been selling seafood products in America since the 1670s.
Oh, that's nice. Can I ask you, how does one go about becoming a fisherman?
I tell people all the time who ask that, fishing is not what you do. A fisherman is what you are. Whether you're born into generations and generations of it, or whether you're born in Iowa and just by happenstance end up becoming a fisherman and realize that that's what you do. It's not a living made out for everybody.
Well, how do you measure success as a fisherman?
It's a very competitive field,
Okay.
extremely competitive, and success is measured, A, if you can make it, if you can pay the bills, and then B, amongst fishermen, it's an unstated characterization of how you produce.
Okay.
Basically, if you consistently produce at the top, no matter whether you're crabbing, clamming, fishing, whatever you're doing, when you produce in that upper echelon consistently, then you're a success.
All right. So do you have then a particular place, if you will, within your fishing community based on your production?
I do.
Okay.
I've been very blessed. I've worked very hard. And I've gotten to a point where whether I'm running my boat, running a boat for somebody else, if I'm mating for somebody else, I've gotten to a point where through hard work, God's grace, and His blessing, that I have gotten to a consistent point in my career as far as producing.
Okay. Does your place within your community change at all, or how is it affected based on your geography?
To a certain extent it is. Of course, in relation to geography and fishing, of course in my line, you need to be near salt water.
Right.
You don't have to be on the water, but you need to be close enough that, proximity is not going to be an issue going and coming.
Okay.
But we're not constrained to geography because fishing, believe it or not, is a very tight-knit community.
Okay.
Of course, I'm known, and I know the fishermen, not just in the area that I live on Roanoke Island, but I know the ones basically in northeastern North Carolina. I know many on the coast of North Carolina, and then through fishing and this small community that I'm talking about, I know many fishermen actually around the world. So you're not really constrained to right where you are. It's a larger network, and I can go anywhere in the world, and if there are fishermen there, it isn't going to take long for me to figure out whether they're actually true fishermen.
Oh,
if that's
interesting.
what they do, if they're, if they're good fishermen, and it isn't going to take them long to figure out the fact that that's what I do, and that's an unspoken, you might call it a code.
Right.
And there might be language barriers, there might be color barriers, there might be gender barriers, any other barrier that has created walls in our world comes down in regards to fishing.
Oh, wow. That's a good story. Audra, can I ask, how did you two meet?
I was home for the summer, waiting tables, and we were between my junior year and senior year in college. And Britton would come into the restaurant where I worked, as did a lot of people who fished in that area, and I met him there. And I walked back in the kitchen, and I turned to a friend of mine, and I said, I'm going to marry that man right there.
Oh, goodness, you knew right then.
Knew right then, whether he liked it or not.
That's wonderful. Well, can I ask you the same question we've been asking folks? Are you happy with your place in the world?
Absolutely. I can be content whether I have plenty or whether I have nothing. I am perfectly content where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you both so much for coming and sharing your story as relates to place.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have Laura Thrower with us today on Everyday Grace TV. Laura, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. We're exploring the idea of place on this episode, and I want to ask you a question that we've asked lots of people in getting ready to put this episode together. We asked people, are you happy with your place in life? I want to hear your answer to that question.
I am happy with my place in life. It's been a journey to get here geographically and emotionally, but ultimately, yeah, I've been really happy for a while now, and I'm really happy with my place.
Good. We're going to come back to that geographic part of your journey in just a second. What I know about you is that you are a rickshaw driver and a teacher, which is a very interesting combination. So I'm looking forward to exploring that. But talk about this geography for just a minute. How did you get here to North Carolina? Tell us where some of that journey may have began for you.
Well, I grew up in Texas, outside of the Dallas area, and I went to college in Austin, and then moved back after college and stayed in Dallas for many years. But about 5 years ago, I moved here after having a career change and a lot of life changes at that time. So.
Okay. Now, again, being a rickshaw driver and a teacher, what career change prompted a move to North Carolina?
When I was in Texas out of college, I went into technology.
Okay.
Just sort of fell into that job. I had started in doing some desktop managing, and then I ended up doing server administration. And I had that career for about 11 years, which I enjoyed and thought it was really great, but I never really had a passion for it, like a lot of people that are in the technology field. And my degree was in something else as well from college. So I had actively kind of taken the steps to go back to school and get certified to become a teacher.
Okay.
And then ended up starting that career path here in North Carolina.
So you came to North Carolina to be a teacher, but along the way found out some very interesting things about teaching in North Carolina. Share a little bit of that experience with us, if you will.
Well, to speak about the rickshaw job, that was the first thing I realized about teaching very quickly was you have to have a second job. So I ended up doing that for a second job. But also while there's lots of rewards with teaching, there's lots of challenges as well. Harder than anything I ever did in my other careers. So.
One of the quotes that from some time that Mary spent interviewing you also, one of the things that she shared with me was that you felt like it was not your job to teach so much as it is to inspire the kids that you teach. We tend to think about teaching as this transfer of information. Here's a list of things that we have to learn. Here's the time frame that we have to learn it in. This is our end goal. You're saying that for you, that's a smaller part of what you do, and then you actually want to inspire these kids. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was interesting when I started my first year. It's, you've gone back to school and they tell you all these things that you need to know about teaching the academic portion, and very quickly you realize that most of that you're not even going to use, and you end up in a position where you find that the academic part of it is 10% of it. 90% is motivating these kids or finding out, their skill set and why there's things that they aren't doing. It's usually, in my mind, I feel like they have past experience with failures of many, many things. And by the time I get them in high school where I teach, I have to basically become a coach is sort of what it is. And until you can tackle that and until you can get their skill set and their motivational level up to a point where they're going to then just be willing to do the academic part of it. So that's really, really challenging. Any teacher will tell you that that's just something that you can't be prepared for until you get in the classroom like that.
But it sounds like that when that happens, when you are able to inspire that child to do something maybe that he or she felt like they couldn't do, or maybe they didn't even want to do, it sounds like there's a huge amount of reward that goes with that. And you mentioned previous careers, you didn't feel passionate about the things that you were doing. It sounds like you're pretty passionate about this, about teaching and inspiring.
Oh yeah, I mean, whether you get a letter from a kid or contact with a parent that may contact you and tell you changed my kid's life in some way, I mean, that's the part of the job. That's why everybody sticks with it, And then, of course, there's all those challenges. But, I even have a wall in my classroom where every letter a kid has given me or a picture or something they drew or whatever that reminds me of those kids. I keep that up there, and I call it my motivational wall. And I tell the other students, like, you need to find something that's going to motivate you from within, because the money's not going to do it in teaching.
So you've had an interesting journey. You've had a chance to travel and see other things. You now have an opportunity to inspire other folks to do the same thing through the teaching that you do, and maybe even some with the rickshaw, pulling the rickshaw. So let me ask you this question. If you could change one thing about your place in life, what would you change?
Interesting question. I think as a rickshaw driver, we get to drive. I get to drive people to downtown events or plays or what have you, and you get to meet a ton of people. But probably one of the things that sometimes you notice is I'm always driving people to these places, but I never get to go to the places, or I never get to go to the play or enjoy the festival. Or the people I meet are great, but then you don't have time to cultivate that friendship, and I don't have the Friday, Saturday nights to go out with them or whatever. And then on top of that, you have a lot of extra work you do as a teacher. So that would be something that would be nice, to just have a lot more free time.
Yep. Laura, I want to say thank you for being here with us today, sharing a part of your story, sharing what it means to be in a place and use wherever it is that you happen to be to inspire other people. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today on Everyday Grace TV.
Thank you. Hi, Belton. Welcome back to Everyday Grace TV.
Thanks, Mary. Good to be here. Jay, you doing all right?
Doing well, Belton. Good to have you with us again.
Thank you very much.
So, Belton, you've heard Laura's story and you've heard Britton's story as they've talked about place. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about your ideas about place.
Oh, okay. Well, as I listened to Laura and Britton, it struck me that one thing, place is about geography. Mm-hmm. Because they all mentioned geography, like I was born in Chesapeake Bay area, but working on Juan Cheese and all that. And people ask that about where were you born, where do you live now, and where's your family from, and those kinds of things become important ways of connecting with folks. Mm-hmm. And you get the situation sometimes that we stereotype people based on what we know about their place. We Southerners sometimes will say, well, he's from the North. You have to expect him to act that way, And I'm sure Northerners sometimes look at those of us down in the South and say, well, you know how those folks are that talk Southern, that say y'all, that's something about a stereotype about that place does that, geography. But I think place is more than just that kind of geography. I think it's also a matter of status. Like you hear someone say, well, she's sort of high and mighty. Somebody ought to put her in her place. Or someone's misbehaving and may say, well, I'll put him in his place, all right. That kind of, that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Status can be that. And you may not like this old saying, Mary, but a woman's place is in the home.
Oh, no.
Okay, I won't go there. But it does remind us that sometimes what we say about a person's place can limit that person. Mm-hmm. And so that the status can be something that builds us up or limit us. Yeah, so it's that. So it's geography and it's status. But I think, it's also a relationship. How do I relate to you? What's my place in your life?
Right.
Is it one of caring, love? Is it doubt or fear, gratitude? Is it emptiness, neglect? That's what is my place in relationship to you. So you got geography, you got status, you got, relationship. I think all working when you talk about place.
It sounds like when you asked the question that we used, how do you feel about your place in the world, without qualifying it for one of those things, you could get a myriad of answers from people because of the different ways that we think about it. We use place kind of as a marker for different things to sort of peg or to say, this is where I am or this is where I've been.
That's right, yeah.
So when we talk about this complex idea of place, as we've been doing, how is it that we can connect these stories of place to God's story or sense of place for us in the world?
It's a good question. One place we might get some help on that is in the Gospel according to Mark. There's a story, it's in the 7th chapter if you want to look it up. It starts with Jesus wanting to get a day off, some time away. He just needs to get away. We forget sometimes Jesus was human. He got tired, he got weary, he got tired of people and wanted to get away from the crowds. So this time he goes a long way from his home territory, and he finds a place, a house, probably 40 or 50 miles from his home back in Galilee. Now, we might be able to get there in an hour's drive, but Jesus, 2-3 days to walk there, he really needed this privacy. He worked that hard to get away. But what makes it interesting about this place, it's not in Jesus' home territory. It's not his home neighborhood. It's a place where Jewish people were few and far between. And he's wandering in amongst folks, some of whom had no faith, some of whom had differing faiths. They had cultural backgrounds that were different. But of course, you know, Jesus had a knack for stepping across boundaries that most folks took seriously. And Jesus would step across those boundaries. Right. And it's while there, in this kind of, shall we call it foreign territory, that a woman comes up to Jesus, and she bows down with the greatest of respect, and she says to him, "Sir, my daughter's in a bad way. Demons have gotten a hold of her or something. Can you do something to help? Can you do something to help?" Now, Mark, when he tells the story, he points out, makes a point out that she was a Syrophoenician woman. Well, now there's a word you do well to memorize. Jay, the next time you're at the supermarket, why don't you turn to the person behind you in line, some stranger, and say, "Syrophoenician, how did the Syrophoenicians do last night in the ball game?"
Just sort of casually work that into the conversation.
You go to the trouble of learning the word.
That's right.
You need
Syrophoenician.
You got it. And I think it'll make you memorable in that store. they'll sure. I think. Yeah, I think they will. But, you know, to say she was Syrophoenician just means she was in that part of Phoenicia that was Syria. Now, Jesus was always getting these kinds of requests to heal. And usually you read those stories and think, wow, that's a good happy ending. But this time his response is something totally different. The answer Jesus gave doesn't really sound like the Jesus we have met other places. He said, "It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the little dogs."
Belton, I'm gonna stop the story right there, because it sounds like you said that Jesus called this woman, the Syrophoenician woman, I worked it in. Yeah. It sounds like he called this woman a dog.
I think that's what it sounds like. It was a major insult in that culture to call someone a dog, because dogs were seen as filthy creatures. They'd eat anything, they'd lick blood off the floor, they ate their own excrement. I mean, this was not exactly a compliment to say, you know, don't give the children's food to the dogs. You know, so is Jesus saying, "Woman, you're only good enough for leftovers," or, you know, talk about putting somebody into her place? Well, there are probably 417, I may have miscounted, maybe 416, but 416 or 17 explanations from students of the Bible about trying to make sense of what Jesus said. Was he teasing? Was he arguing that some people should get in line in front of others? Was he testing the woman's faith? Was he using some kind of ultimate put down? Was there something else going on? But the woman said something back to Jesus. Very interesting. When Jesus said children ought to be fed instead of feeding to the dogs, she said, "Yes, sir, but you know the puppies under the table get to eat the crumbs from the children."
She pushed back a little bit.
She did. She was pretty special in that culture. She sort of forgot her place, and she pushed back a little bit and said, "You know, we eat these crumbs under the table." That was an interesting thing. We use napkins, knives, and forks, but back then, they used bread for all these kinds of things. They would pick up their meat with bread and hold it, and they need to sop their plate. They would go around with the bread. Their hands got greasy. Then they would take the bread and wipe their hands and just throw it under the table. So there was food there to be had. So when she said, even the puppies get to eat what's under the table, Jesus said, "Bingo." Well, that's a rough translation. Rough translation. He said, "Bingo, you got that right. The gifts of God are for everyone, and these boundaries and barriers that we have created for place are wiped out by the full love of God." And the woman went home and discovered that her daughter was healed and the demons were gone. I think all along Jesus had seen his ministry as Messiah to the Jews. That seems fairly clear. But here in this situation, it's almost as if he's thinking out loud. And he sees his mission is a little bit wider than that. It's all people. be it places of geography, place of status, or place of relationship, this woman's request sort of seals the deal for him. You're right. The love of God is for all, Jew, Gentile, for all. So finally, the story says we're not defined by our place in the scheme of things. We are defined by our place in God's full and accepting love.
Well, Belton, can I ask you, what do we do in the meantime when, in so many ways, as we've talked about, we're defined by place?
I think we can choose to be defined by place or not. If we are defined by place, then we're going to have the limitations that that place puts upon us. But if we define ourselves by a hope which is larger than our place, then we can see that hope in others, we can claim it for ourselves, and then working together with others, that hope can come alive as God's presence and God's yes to us comes alive, because then we have connected with one another, and in that connection have made connection with God.
Thank you, Belton.
Belton, thank you so much once again for sharing with us from the Bible and from your wisdom, sharing all of that with us on Everyday Grace TV. We appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Good to wander by again.
Always a delight.
Thanks.
We are going to conclude this episode with a new song written by Jay and performed by Jay, Adam Seat, and Jimmy Creighton. The song, You Are, is up next.
You are the peace of all things calm. You are the place to hide from harm. You are the light that shines in the dark. You are the heart's eternal spark. You are hope for the hopeless, to the sinner a friend. You're my shelter, my refuge. When the world crashes in, you're the maker of the universe. Still you know my heart. Forever I'll sing